Hi, Jill. There's Georgia. There's Erin. Yay.
Hi.
We got one that's having problems with the link, so we're going to give him a couple seconds. How was your day?
I'm worn out after court.
That was a hearing and a half this
Yeah,
morning.
it
Goodness.
really was.
I guess that Allie expected that things were going to get changed. Yeah.
Yeah, and she texted me after court and just said, "Does this mean I won't get Addie back?" And I said, "I don't think so."
Yeah.
Bless her heart. And she really provided a wonderful home,
Yeah.
but it's not meant to be, I don't think.
Yeah. And really, Dad is doing well. I'm really surprised that trial home visit hasn't started. I mean, that stage of where he's at, he really should have trial home visit already. So,
Well,
what do I know?
it was the hair follicle thing that threw him off. I mean, it went from like 500 to over 2,000, and that's a real problem because obviously you hear that from more than one person.
Right, right. But now he's
So,
got a result that shows zero, and
uh-huh.
yeah, that's just craziness.
Yeah, I don't know.
Hi, Angela. You're outside. We're going to give Ken a couple seconds. He was having problems with the link, so we'll give him 1 or 2 more minutes, and then we'll get started. Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and start since we're recording. If Ken misses a minute or two, he can always go back and watch the recording for that missed couple seconds. So, uh, tonight, as our guest speaker, we have Erin Randol, and I'm going to just turn the whole floor over to her and let her preach away and teach us all sorts of things.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm gonna try and share my screen without showing you my whole life here. Hold on, let me get it together. 1 second. We're gonna talk about trauma-informed care tonight. And so I'm a licensed clinical social worker in the Cape Girardeau area. Let me get my screen to work. I own a private practice, and did that work? Yeah, okay. I own a private practice. I mainly serve women with anxiety, moms of young children, pregnant women, and we work on navigating their childhood trauma so that they can show up better as a parent with their current children. And that's my whole niche. I absolutely love what I do. And I think a mutual friend of ours was just trying to help find some. I guess you guys have to do continuing education to be a volunteer for CASA. Is that right? So
Right. Yeah, these are all in service for continuing
perfect.
education. Yep. Yep.
Okay, so I'm just here to kind of share what I love to talk about anyway for an hour, and we'll just kind of pick your brain. So, and everybody can see my screen, right? It worked. Okay, perfect. So trauma-informed care. Have you guys, like, I guess just raise your hand if you're familiar with that term or if you've ever seen anything about that before? No. I wasn't going to get too nitty gritty on exactly what it is because I feel like the training will kind of explain it as we go. But in my opinion, so I'm a licensed clinical social worker. So trauma informed care is a pretty big deal in my world. There's trauma informed care, which I think everyone can know, from nurses to teachers to volunteers to just people in our community. And it's how to be with people that are in or responding to or coming out of some kind of traumatic event or a chronic series of events because we want to work with those people in a certain way. There's trauma informed care, and then there's also in social work therapist world, like trauma trained. And this is when we get into like the really deep, like therapeutic clinical training. We're not doing any of that tonight. We're just talking about being trauma informed, not trauma treatment. So there are two different things in my world. But we're going to talk about trauma informed care, what it is, and how to practice it. It sounds a little fancier than it probably is. It's really just how to show up for people that are going through a hard time. So we're going to do that together. All right. So what it is, I've got a few different like what it is and then what it's not. So this will all kind of flow together once we get our groove here in a minute. So what trauma informed care is, right? So the way we would show up is cultural competence. So cultural competence is kind of a jargony word, but it basically means that we want to be mindful of the culture, the demographics, the heritage, the generational things that a person that we're working with comes to us with. So this can be, man, like their ethnicity, their their genealogy, their dialect. There's going to be so many things. And I think I have this later, but when you're culturally competent as a therapist or just as a person in the world, it does not mean that you know everything about every culture. You don't understand the depths of Hispanic family units. You don't have to understand the depths of like a certain socioeconomic class, right? You don't have to know about poverty and you don't have to know all those things. I think being culturally competent is actually recognizing that you don't know all of those things and still showing up for that person, staying curious about what that could actually look like. Trying least restrictive options first. I guess I have a quick question. I know what CASA is, but how often do you guys actually work with the child? Do you meet with them as much as the case requires, or do you just meet like because you have to kind of show up in court for them, correct?
So basically, the volunteers are asked to see the kids at least once a month for at least an hour.
Okay.
If they want to see the kids more often than that, that's great. And then we will also attend the family support team meetings,
Okay.
which will happen anywhere from once a month to once every 6 months if it's an older case. And then we will also attend court to represent the child.
So is different than a guardian ad litem?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So basically, uh, every child that comes into care does get a guardian ad litem,
Okay.
and those people are attorneys.
Correct.
They are paid for their services, whereas we have
Correct.
volunteers doing this job. They do not have to see the kids. We have many guardian ad litems that almost never see the kids, but yet they will advocate for the best interests of the child. So we are more in depth, more intensive in our services.
Yeah, this is a great thing to be talking about then. I knew it was something like that, but I wasn't sure all the different complexities of it. So trying least restrictive options first. I mean, that could be, golly, from your 1 hour meeting with a kid, something like maybe they're really rambunctious and some kind of random example came to my mind, like maybe they're very talkative, but you're trying to build a relationship with them and meet them where they are, but you also want to actually know how they're doing. But they want to talk about the sky is blue and have you seen this episode of whatever bluey, and a really loose example of least restrictive options first would be to sit with them in that and just stay curious instead of being like, okay, my turn to talk, right? Anything that's like rigid or like kind of restricting them, putting them in some kind of container of how they can behave and how they can't behave, especially if they're not hurting anyone or someone else. We don't want to go to that option first in trauma informed care approaches. Similarly, person first care is very similar. So it sounds like this is right up CASA's alley as far as like the person of the child as their own person, right? You get to know them, you advocate for them, you show up with rules, but not in such a rigid way that you don't actually get to even know the kid. Um, Acknowledging what the body needs. We'll talk about this one more in a little bit. This goes into kind of just, again, we don't know what we don't know and acknowledging that, but also knowing that trauma does impact the body. The neglect impacts the body. Chronic abuse affects the body, not just physically, but mentally, even we call them somatic symptoms, which means physical symptoms. Knowing that that can impact a child at any age and the whole person at any age is a good trauma informed care practice. Listening without always fixing. I feel like you guys are probably good at this because there's a lot of things you can't fix. But I think this is a really hard one for people, honestly, like teachers and nurses that I work with or that I kind of share this education with. It's so hard because they're in such a fix it is helping mindset. And in trauma informed care, it's not always. Sometimes listening and being present is the help that that person needs in the time. Okay, this is probably the biggest thing I could hand you. In like the 90s, Oprah Winfrey and Bruce Perry maybe, was a psychologist out of Chicago. They wrote a book called What Happened to You. And it really changed the game from research and brain science from before the 80s or 90s. The trauma world looked at someone with traumatic symptoms as what's wrong with you. And then Oprah and I think it was Bruce Perry, wrote this book and did a ton of research that really shifted the narrative to what happened to you, right? And we get curious about their experience and not shaming their behaviors because of their experience. All that makes sense so far. Thumbs up. Okay. Cool. Similarly, what trauma informed care is not. So really simple about what we just said. Believing you know everything about culture is different than yours. I'm telling you, it goes such a long way with people, kids included, to say, I don't really think I get it. Or am I missing something? Or I didn't know that. Can you help me understand? Without telling them they explain it all to you, right? Just showing up and being like, oh, I don't think that I really understand that, instead of trying to appear as if you understand them, right? Jumping to conclusions. This one could probably be really hard because sometimes we don't even know we're doing it. I feel like in CASA world, this would be really important, to not jump to conclusions. So this is back to the child's language, the way they've learned language, the way they've understood their world through their vocabulary or lack thereof, right? Maybe they're showing certain behaviors or certain words that sound a little like yucky or concerning. But we want to just, again, stay curious with them until we get more information. Or honestly, maybe we don't get more information, but if we go back to that least restrictive thing, we're not going to force them to talk, right? We're not going to force people to talk in trauma informed care. Um, Unnecessary restrictions on the other person. I mean, to me, this could be as simple as, no, Johnny, you can't get this piece of chocolate until we're done with our thing. Now, maybe he needs some motivators and the whole team is okay with that. But if we're just going to walk into someone that we're trying to build a relationship with and lay down the ground rules, it usually doesn't build connection very well. And I really think these last two are important. So I think we've got a lot of people pleasers and a lot of helpers in our world that really do want to wear their heart on their sleeve and really want to help. And I bet CASA has a lot of like people who really enjoy and truly passionate about helping. But in trauma informed care is not being a pushover. Oh, you need that by tomorrow? Sure, sure, sure. When you've got 10 other things to do by tomorrow. Being strong for everyone else sounds kind of counterintuitive, but truly, that is not trauma informed care. Because what are you modeling for the kid? Your needs aren't important. My needs aren't important. I haven't eaten lunch today, but oh well, I'll do this thing because somebody else needs me to. That's not really, in social work world, that's not really what we're going for. Everybody with me so far? Okay, we're doing great. Good job. All right, there's some more of what it is not. Similarly, saying yes before your own needs are met. This could really be about anything, as simple as not like not using the bathroom if you need a bathroom break before you start one of your hour visits, right? Instead of saying, give me just a minute, or let me get a glass of water. I mean, it could be that simple. Texting or responding to people at 11 o'clock at night when you're trying to go to bed, things like that. That is for us and the other person, that would not be something that trauma informed care would encourage. Making promises you can't keep. I feel like this is a really big one because I think society, how do I want to say this? I think society, with the best of intentions, has kind of created this dialogue around comfort coming from something like, it'll all be okay. And I just can't imagine a world where that would be a trauma informed thing to say to someone that has just been through it, been neglected or abused, or honestly, car wrecks, right? Like it can be one trauma incident or chronic. To say it'll all be okay, that's a pretty broad statement for someone who is really going through it. And we usually can't control that many variables in someone's life to make a promise like that. Now, maybe we could say, I plan to see you next month at such and such time. And if I can't, I'll make sure I let you know. That's a good promise to make, right? It's not even promising that you'll be there for sure next month, but you'll say, and if I can't, I'll make sure. That makes sense, the difference between those things. Yeah. So shaming and blaming others and yourself. I mean, this one can be as loose as like, I should have known better. In my world, that's a shaming kind of statement, right? Whereas really in trauma-informed care, it might sound more like, I'm still learning. We're all still learning. So we should know that. Isolation, rigid thinking. So this is kind of as it sounds. And this is kind of another hard one that I don't think society knows they do as much as they do. Rigid thinking, I mean, this goes down to like using right versus wrong language with someone, like using good and bad language with someone. That wouldn't really be something we do in trauma informed care. we would use a lot of noticing reflective statements. And so I don't work with kids. So I don't know exactly what that would sound like on a kid level. But with my moms like that I work with, they might say, I yelled at my kid last night at supper. We were all so chaotic. I'm just like the worst mom ever. That was a bad way to parent. I did it wrong, right? You can hear in their language that rigid thinking. Well, sure, that doesn't line up to the way you want to show up as a parent. Totally. I hear that. Let's maybe broaden our perspective a little bit. And again, I don't know that you talk to a kid like this, but for you guys, broaden your perspective a little bit and say, okay, we didn't like that. That's how that ended up. How can I help you? What kind of help do you need? How would you like to show up in those moments next time? If that didn't feel good, how can we show up in that moment better next time? Maybe not so much for the kid on this one, but I think even, man, with all the variables of people that you guys work with, I bet it could feel kind of lonely sometimes when it doesn't feel like there's a lot of people in the kids' corner. I feel like that would be pretty isolating. So we want to be mindful of that and not create more isolation. Um, and of course, anything that creates a power and control dynamic, you can go super old school, like when I don't speak when I'm speaking, or when I speak, you listen, like those kind of things that have been kind of normalized over time. Those don't, again, land well if we're trying to build a connection with someone, especially a child. It would sound a lot more like, and I have more examples here in a minute, but it would sound more like I'm sure you guys have protocols and everything for this that I don't know very well, but I would walk in with a kid and I would simply just say, hi, I'm Erin. Nice to meet you. And then honestly, I probably wouldn't say anything else. I would probably pause and I would see if they're even looking at me. I would see if they even want me to be there. Right. And then I would follow their lead. As long as they're not hurting me or someone else, I follow their lead. Um, and then it is not what is wrong with you. Again, society literally uses that language a lot. What is wrong with you? When really a trauma-informed care perspective would say, man, what happened to you? You were, really struggling today, or man, that was really hard. Whatever kind of language we notice there. Okay. So nitty gritty. Trauma-informed care can look and sound like. I get to give you lots of examples. I could geek out on this topic for a really long time. So you just raise your hand or something if I'm like, I will pause for questions near the end, but I just tell me if I'm going too fast. So there's different components of trauma-informed care. One of them is to promote safety. So trauma-informed care amplifies a sense of safety for you and the other person. I think, again, safety is not, it'll all be okay. Or even the opposite, like you could even go the other end of the spectrum, like you can do whatever you want here. You can have whatever you want here. We're probably well intentioned if we say something like that, but that's not really fair, right? Like if I'm a child, honestly, even an adult, trying to make sense of my world and my environment, and someone says like you can do anything you want, or they give really loosey goosey expectations, that can be, there's a fine line is what I'm trying to say. There's a good balance. I'm thinking of like play therapists and how they'll say like in the playroom you can do and say almost anything you want to do and say, right? That's kind of like a standard line for play therapy so that the kid knows these toys are your toys to play with, and like there are certain safety rules in here. So for safety, I think boundary setting language is really important and it's super simple. I teach my grown up clients this kind of boundary setting language probably every day. And so some of those boundary setting barriers or boundary setting skills is like, this is what's okay, this is what's not okay. And then, and that could be for anything. It's okay for you to be frustrated. I mean, I'm really getting therapy on you, but like I might even say like it's okay to throw the stack of papers if you are that frustrated. It's not okay to throw them at me. It's okay to kick the wall if you have to. I don't know. I'm just making stuff up, but we don't kick me, right? And then what's okay, what's not okay. It's okay if you want to talk the entire time and I don't. It's not okay if whatever, I don't know, if they become violent or something. The big part of this one is, especially as a grown up to a child dynamic, you flip it and you say, okay, now you tell me what's okay with you and what's not okay with you. And if they don't know, it's not their job to know, but this just offers them an opportunity at an age appropriate level to say, I don't want you to ask me about this, but I guess I can talk to you about school. I don't like it when you call me that name, call me this one. Those are so like such fundamental parts of trauma informed care. Another way to do it is my job, your job. I love this one for kids because, man, again, how confusing. Like, especially, I mean, even my most high achieving functional adult clients still have memories of, have one that like remembers being 4 years old and like moving her dad's like vodka away and cleaning the whole house because her little sister was coming home with the mom from the hospital and the house was an absolute disaster. And so at 4 years old, she had learned it was her job to cut dad off when he's been drinking too much, right? So that's kind of a, it's made it sound like an extreme example, but this is someone that is a very high functioning adult. Children's division never got involved in her life. I mean, these are just people in our world. And so a my job, your job model, I use it all the time in the therapy room. Like, it's my job as your therapist to let you know if I feel like I can't help you anymore and then to help you find someone who can. It's my job as your therapist to cut us off at 45 minutes. It's my job as your therapist, right? And so that really gives them a lot of structure without it being restrictive. Does that all make sense so far? Okay. All right. Choice is another big part of trauma-informed care, especially for us, children or adults that have been directly or indirectly receiving a message in their world that, like, I don't know, it can be a million things. They're not good enough. They're unsafe. They're incompetent. They're unlovable. These are a lot of things that people indirectly or directly, messages that, again, anyone out in the world, people not involved with children's division, learn and they're growing up. And so then if we look at the other end of that spectrum, it would maybe sound like, I am learning, or I'm learning that I'm good enough. It's over, I'm safe now. And then a big one is, I have choices. So we want to set that tone for them as much as we can within safety reasons. That sounds very, like, here's the algorithm is what I'm going to give you. We have choices could sound like, if, man, I don't know if this is an appropriate example, but the first thing that came to my mind was like, if, say this is a teenager who knows what's going on, if dad can finish rehab successfully, then we'll start to do overnights, right? Like, if it's age appropriate, like, I'm not pushing it here, we wouldn't tell a toddler that, but like, if we would, but if it's age appropriate, I'm just trying to get a good example. Let me see if I can think of a better example. I worked with a client way back in the day who had Down syndrome, and he really loved Burger King. And so they would say, if you, whatever, don't hit staff for the first half of the day, then we can go get fries at Burger King. Does that make more sense? Some kind of if then. Similar thing, yes, if. So yeah, as a parent myself, I would even say, like, yes, you can go jump on the trampoline if and when you go put your dishes in the sink. Just something really simple, right? We give them those opportunities, we give them choices, we try to really allow them the autonomy and independence to make these decisions for themselves within safety and reason. A first then combo is really nice too. First, we have to go to court on whatever date, and then we'll get to hear what the decision will be for what will happen in July, right? First, then. Okay, offer them permission to tell you no. I really like this one. Honestly, it would be something that I would set up as soon as I met someone, adult or child. There's in therapy sessions all the time, like, hey, you can tell me to be quiet. You can tell me you don't want to answer that question. You can tell me I'm off my rocker. Like, you can tell me anything you need to tell me if I'm not getting it right or if you no longer feel safe in this relationship. And then the biggest piece of this puzzle is when they do tell you no, you actually honor that, right? You're like, well, we've got to still talk about this. That would not be trauma-informed care. It would be like, okay, you said no, I heard you. Thank you for telling me. The last one is really getting a little bit more into the trauma treatment world, but I'm going to hand it to you as a trauma-informed care example. Create a safe word or signal. So when someone's in a session and we're processing trauma, they have a previously established like safe word with me. Either that's just their hand raised, like stop, I need a minute, or it's the word skip. I often give them as an option, like skip, next question, whatever. That really helps. And again, when they actually do use it, I would almost say go over the top. Oh, good job telling me to skip. I got it. We are going to skip today. Awesome. Really like let them know they're safe to do that. Okay. Um, Trust. This is a hard one, very hard one. Trust is not oversharing. Trust is almost the opposite of that. Trust is almost when they don't share something with you, you respect it because that's their choice. When they don't tell you every little detail, it's not because they don't trust you, it's because that's their choice, period. Hard stop. Trauma-informed care creates an opportunity to build trust with staying curious and open. So these are just some, like on the last slide, I kind of give you some algorithm kind of statements. These are just some scripts that I would hand you as tools to build that trust, to stay curious. So I will say with teenagers, some of these questions might not land, but with kids and honestly adults for sure, like I could see in like a family support team meeting, some of these questions would be helpful. Like, okay, so Johnny is going to stay here and he's going to start overnight visits and then blah, blah, blah. Am I getting that right? Did I hear that correctly? Right. And it's not a condescending thing. It's simply like curiosity. Like I want clarity so that we can all be on the same page and work together on this. For a kid, and honestly, this one would be good for a teenager. Maybe you feel like, oh, sorry, my typo here. Maybe you feel like I'm not getting it. Honestly, I'm kind of getting into trauma treatment again, so bear with me. But on this one, I look for body signals. If they were making good eye contact with you and then all of a sudden you say something, they look away, I would ask, am I not getting it right? Did I miss something? Right? And it's not calling them out on their body language, it's noticing. It's being present and like giving them the one-on-one attention they deserve. Hey, did I get that wrong? Or, whatever. It's not, are you okay? Is something wrong? That's different. That's a different vibe. We're over here and like, oh, am I not getting it right? Do you hear the difference in those two things? Oh, am I not getting it right versus what's wrong? What happened? There's a difference. Again, not telling them that it would be okay. That would not build trust. If we were to say, it'll be okay, we'll figure this out. We can say, I'm going to work hard for you. We can say, I'm so glad that I get to work with you, right? But making promises that we can't keep is a deal breaker in trust world. Another clarifying kind of trust building question. I don't know if I'm understanding. Can you tell me more? I like this one. Back to that cultural competence piece again from one of our first slides. Maybe they're talking about the way that their dad leads the home. And it sounds kind of restrictive and rigid and controlling, but stay curious, right? Maybe there's something in their culture that's actually safe for them that maybe, I'm just throwing it out there, right? I'm not really understanding. It sounds like nobody can use the car unless dad says they can. Is that right? Can you tell me, has it always been that way? What's going on with that? And then when they're like, never mind, I don't want to talk about it, you can say, okay, thanks for telling me. Next question, right? Or they say, well, yeah, don't you know that da 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 da? We can't use a car because they have to use it for night shift. And we could have taken one statement like dad doesn't let mom use the car. And we could have turned that into a whole scenario in our head of what that home life looks like. So we say, I'm not sure. Can you tell me more? And we might get more information. I think this last one might be the biggest thing I could hand you today. All of these questions, all these curiosities, all of these scripts that I'm giving you tonight, I want to strongly caveat all of that with being mindful that it's not the child's job to help you get it. We can offer them opportunities to help us get it, but it is never their job to help us get it, because honestly, they might not get it themselves. And even if they do, that might be something their body and their mind are still processing. In trauma treatment, we would never do an intake and be like, tell me all of your trauma and just write it down. Okay, bye. Never. We would never do that. That lights up certain parts of the brain that can dysregulate people. Even talking about certain traumatic things will light up certain parts of the brain that could re-spark that wound easily, very easily. So we want to be mindful that it's not a child's job to help us get it, whatever it is. Collaboration is another big piece of trauma-informed care. Collaboration creates a space for collaboration without avoiding potential conflict. So this might sound a little counterintuitive, but I think that sometimes people think about collaboration as like I don't know, like a round table or probably a FST meeting, collaboration in some regard. I think that in some places of our society, collaboration requires like niceties. I don't know how else to say it. And I would say in trauma-informed care, it doesn't have to be. I think that collaboration can be like, hey, I cannot get on board with that idea. I cannot get on board with that idea. That's what the team decides, but I can't get on board with that idea. And I'm happy to tell you why if you want to know. I think that is what collaboration can sound like. Okay, so scripts for this one. And these are more collaboration with the person, the child. I hear you want blank, and I am or I'm not able to give you that, help you with that, whatever at this time. This is, again, modeling what clear communication sounds like. No empty promises, no willy-nilly, directness. Directness is kindness, people, right? Directness is kindness. So as much as we can be honest and transparent at age-appropriate levels, that's what we're shooting for. Here are your other options. It's a classic, but a goodie. I don't know the answer. Let me see if I can find someone who might. It's not saying I'll find out. Even that I would be cautious of. Sometimes I would say, I don't know the answer. Let me see. Let me dig into it. I also want to caveat that with, because of child's processing, ages and stages of development or trauma related, they might have heard, you told me you were going to get the answer. We can still be misunderstood. That does still happen in trauma-informed care. And we want to be mindful of that. And we would meet that with like, oh man, I'm so sorry. Like, that's not the way I took it. I can see how maybe, I can see how you got there. That's a big one. I can see how you got there. This is what, let me clarify, or let me help us figure this out together. And then here's what I can offer you right now. What are your thoughts? So offering it back to them is a big one too. All right, so pull it all together. I guess I want to pause. Any questions yet? How are we doing? I don't know if I can see everyone with my weird screen here. Okay, are we good? I think we're good. All right, pull it all together. I've got 3 parts to this slide because it's basically taking everything we just talked about and giving you even more context. So when I was talking about, I think it was slide 1 or something, about what trauma-informed care is, and that it's like giving the body what it needs. They say that it takes 24 to 48 hours for a body to rebalance. Now, maybe a kid's balance is still a little chaotic, right? But whatever that means for the person of their back to their baseline is what we call it, their version of normal, it could take 24 to 48 hours to rebalance after, this is a big one, after a perceived or real threat has been experienced. So maybe dad didn't hit them on this visit, but he was angry and he could have. That our body reacts the same to that. I always use this like kind of random example of like if I see a tornado headed for my house and I don't know if it's going to hit my house or not, my body is still going to experience that as if I'm about to be hit by a tornado, right? So like that crap that people say about like, well, they didn't actually hit you or they didn't actually, your body does not know the difference most of the time. It truly does not. So 24 to 48 hours after a perceived, so could have happened or real threat. And even if we as adults are like, no, that couldn't have happened, if a child or anyone thinks that it could have, that's really real to them in their experience. We want to notice that. Supporting without fixing. I mentioned that earlier. I think the main key ingredients in supporting without fixing is kindness, flexibility, creativity, and I would add directness after that comma there that shouldn't be there. Directness, not bossiness, right? Directness is kindness. So like, this is what I can do for you. This is what I can't do for you kind of language. Okay, this one's a little interesting, but I feel like it's worth mentioning. Explain competing priorities with age-appropriate doses of transparency. So that's a fancy way to say, don't be slimy. I don't know how else to say that. Don't be slimy. So like for teachers, this might be getting a little in the weeds real quick. For teachers, for example, let's say that there's a teacher at a school district whose kid at a different building did something. And ideally, that kid would get a certain kind of consequence for that behavior. But because their mom's part of the district and they know people, just a hypothetical situation here, then that doesn't get done the way that was probably most fair and most equitable for everyone. In trauma-informed care, that might still happen, but it's with age-appropriate, like I don't know what the example would be there. Either the parent or the community member or the school social would be like, hey, we've got a conflict. We've got some things that weren't done correctly here. Right? They don't have to overshare who did what and blame people. But I really feel like kids already kind of know. I feel like they pick up on crap like that. And especially teenagers of like, does so-and-so know so-and-so? And I mean, cops and like children's division workers and there's just so many different crossovers. Foster parents getting paid, is that a competing priority, right? Do I need to explain like, hey, I do get paid for you to stay here, this is what that money is going to go towards? That's what this would look like in trauma-informed care. I do get paid for you to stay here. This is what that money goes towards. If you ever have questions, please ask me. I'm happy to answer them. Versus like whatever else I can do. Okay, more part 2 of this. Okay, so acknowledging you don't know what you don't know really does go a long way. I talk about it mainly with cultural competence, about demographics and generational things, but it literally goes for anything. Like, I don't know if Burger King's open past 10. I mean, literally, it can be that like helpful to a child who already feels this kind of default sense of power and control dynamic just because you're a grown up. Say, I actually don't know that one. And if you want to be extra fancy on this one, it's flipping on its back and being like, wow, that's a really good answer. I'm so glad you knew that. I didn't know that one. That really goes a long way with trust building with honestly children and adults. Trying to think of a good example on that one. Thinking of my own kids, and I swear they're smarter than me on like half the things they know. And like my son, he's a really good artist. He's 8, and he'll like do something with like acrylic oils, and I'll be like, I would have never known that. And it's very authentic and genuine. I'm not trying to like toot his horn, but I think that goes a long way for him. He's like, well, yeah, and did you know, blah, 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 right? So it's just that relationship building. Okay, power and control dynamics do work. They do work. If you want to define work as power and control, right? If you want to define thinking, and I don't want to get into all of that like without my realm of knowledge here, but if you want to say, let's go crazy, let's say whipping, like actual like abusive reactions to get a child to mind or something like that, technically that might work, but at what expense? I mean, we know the expense to some extent. Um, they don't feel safe in their own body. They don't feel safe with their caregivers. They learn that bad choices are mistakes. I wouldn't even say bad choices. A mistake is not an opportunity to learn, it's an opportunity to be punished, right? So maybe it works, but to what extent? Maybe walking in and saying, like, this is how this is going to go, and you're going to blah, 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 might scare a child for a minute for you to get what you need. But then what? Like, what's the point, really, in the long game for that? Power and control dynamics rarely, I would almost say never, build connection, build safe connection. I'll say that. And the power of making safe connections is a game changer. In that book with Oprah and Bruce Perry, they have a section in there that talks about how, in the substance abuse world, the one thing that I don't know if it would say like stronger than meth, for example, but the one antidote to substance abuse is the power of safe connection. And it's such a sad story because people who have substance abuse, for example, that they talk about in that book, they've kind of ruined all their connections from lying and stealing and their behaviors being, addicted. But in that book, they say like, they're basically saying like the power of safe connection is stronger than meth addiction to some extent, which makes a lot of sense to me because human creatures are meant to be around other human creatures, and that's how it's been since cavemen. And so connection is important. Okay, I think I have one more on this. Yeah. We kind of talked about this. Safe words, safe signals. A good one I hand people is the word skip or next question. I mean, you could be as formal as no thank you if they wanted to. The raised hand signals, timeout, anything like that. I also would say that there's kind of this hard learning curve in society about boundaries being rude. And I could see how we got there, but I just don't think it's true. Um, so like a boundary could look as simple as, hey, I have 2 minutes. I want to hear what you have to say, but I just want you to know right now before we start, I have literally 3 minutes before I have to walk into this next room, right? That's a perfect boundary. Um, Another one, as an example of like what I think boundaries and expectation setting can look like. Hey, you can talk to me now for 7 minutes on the phone while I drive to such and such, or later tomorrow I have 15 minutes that I could give you. Which one do you prefer? Right? Um, okay. Share your thoughts with me on Tuesday. Um, Thoughts, questions. I don't know if it's just songs. Let's see what I got here. Okay, yeah, that's the end of it. That's the name of my business, Sunrise Therapy Services. I provide online services mainly for pregnant women, women with anxiety, mothers of young children across the state of Missouri. And that's the gist about me. I would love, we have 15 minutes. I could really talk for another 15 minutes, so don't worry. But let me stop sharing my screen and come back to you all. Did it stop? Nope, it didn't. You just see my babies for 10 seconds. All right. All right. Any questions or thoughts for me about all that?
Erin,
Yes,
I enjoyed all of that. My questions, we deal with parents too, obviously,
yeah.
or foster parents and biological parents, and the mothers that you see, if they've had trauma in the past and it wasn't addressed, do you see that they're much more likely to not to parent the way they were parented, or I don't know if that makes sense, but
Great question.
make the same mistakes their parents did, or
Yeah, man, there's so many answers to that. The short answer is yes. And then I have like three parts over here. One is just biology. One is biology, whether that's mental health biology or substance use biology that's passed down through the generations. That's one piece. The other piece is okay, this is going to get real technical, but I think of trauma work as working with the parts of us. So this is not like multiple personalities. This is
yeah,
like I have a part that shames me when I do something wrong, or I have a part that overthinks, or I have a part that gets really ragey, right? These are parts of us that get the microphone, and shame is parts. Shame is their own parts. And there's two ways that shame comes up. One is I shame my own self. God, I'm so stupid. Why did I do that? No, that would it would say I'm bad is what shame would sound like if I'm in my shame parts. But then there's shaming parts, and that's like you idiot. God, you're so stupid. And what they say about the shaming parts is that the fancy way to say it is we pick up traits of our own perpetrators, if that makes any sense. We pick up traits of our own perpetrators, which could be mom, dad, whatever, into our own psyche, and they show up as parts of us. What's really crazy about it is most of the time, those parts are actually trying to help us stay afloat, help us not get in trouble again, help us whatever. But that's the way that our parts learn to do their job in our system. You idiot. God, you just can't do anything right. Does that make sense?
yeah.
So that's like the more deeper answer. And then the third one is, I think it's just, gosh, like my brain says, I wouldn't know how to parent either.
Mhm.
You know, I would not know how to parent. And even if I did know the kind of parent that I wanted to show up as, like say, okay, I want to be a safe parent. I want to be a fun parent, a consistent and kind parent. People, even the most high functioning people, don't know how to be those things when they're also the tired parent, the overworking parent, the parent that's a single mom with low income. They don't know how those two worlds exist.
Yeah,
And it's not easy to learn it either. So I don't know if that answered your question, but those are my thoughts.
it did. Thank you.
You're welcome. Georgia, your name sounds extremely familiar to me. Georgia Chameleon. Did you work in the social work world?
I'm a retired nurse practitioner, and we,
Oh, that's how I know you.
yeah,
Okay, so I worked at Covenant Care
yeah.
as their behavioral director for a few years. That makes a
I,
lot of sense.
I was at Cross Trails
Yeah,
Medical Center there in Cape for a long time.
that's what, oh, yes. I
Okay,
love it. Nice to see you again.
you too.
Um, okay, other questions or thoughts? Okay, I can, I can what? Do whatever we need to
They're
do.
being bashful.
Huh?
They're being a little bit bashful tonight. So
Oh man, I like questions. I'm telling you, you guys are going to want to ask questions. I will talk the next 9 minutes and you won't shut me up. It's horrible. I'm awful about this. Any questions? I have a story I'm thinking of if we want to do a story.
go for
Um,
it.
so this is again kind of trauma treatment y, but I just feel like I'm in the right crowd to share a little deeper. The story that's coming up for me is about children and even adults who engage in self-harm behaviors. And the reason I bring that up is because this is like really, really hard for even still like today clinicians to see as not a problem, like just to not see it as a problem that needs fixing, right? Because like they've got to get this under control or they've got to stop or and then we get into like um I call it like risk management. I don't know if that's still the right term. Of like, okay, well, if we're going to have these urges to cut or self harm, how can we do it so that our kids are with another caregiver? How can we do it to make sure that, right? So that sounds really counterintuitive. Like I'm helping this person cut themselves, is how it feels to a lot of people. And I think we're slowly starting in clinician world and therapist world to get on the same page that if they like, if they could just stop, they would have by now. So what are we doing trying to shame people into stopping, and safety plans can only go so far kind of stuff. So it's just a very it's just a very like stark example of how trauma informed care can show up in something as risky and dangerous and like emotionally charged as a mom or a child self-harming. And what that can look like in the therapy room. And in my world, and there's lots of different modalities to look at this different ways, but in trauma informed care meets trauma treatment world, we would see the urge to self harm as a part. And most of the time, a part that says there's no way out. If this is suicidality, it's problem solving. I'm not a good mom. My kids deserve better. There's no way out of this domestic violence situation, right? It's a part that's trying to problem solve. And in self-harm, it might be a part that's shamer, possibly. They have lots of roles, but it could be a part that's like, you deserve to be punished. You're so bad. Look how bad you are. And these parts, man, they can get massively loud. And then add substance use, add depression, add history of everything. And it's really hard to know who you even are anymore when these parts have had the microphone in your body for so long, including self-harm behaviors. So I think that's a really hard one because there is such a level of danger to that dynamic. And it does require a lot of one-on-one treatment, but it's a really awesome, beautiful, empowering, and powerful thing when we can realize that part only wanted that person to like do what the part thought was the right thing to do. Right? Does that sound so counterintuitive? But I think you guys probably live in a world where this makes sense. So I don't do crisis work in my practice. I work with people who are pretty functional. They might be on leave of absence from work, but for the most part, they're pretty functional. But they'll say like they get unhinged on their kids or they snap at their husband or whatever. And they're like, I do not want to show up like that kind of parent anymore. And again, they know they want to be a safe, kind, loving parent, but they don't know how to do that when like it's 8 o'clock and everyone's screaming and they still haven't had supper. And it's a really hard for those worlds to come together. A lot of people are lacking balance in their world, balance in their own bodies. And so in my world, and when we get into like the therapy treatment side, we're working on finding that balance. Okay. My thoughts. Anything else? I don't know if I have much else left. That could be 5 minutes worth.
We don't have to hold you for a second. We're not that tight on time. So, Ken, did you have anything?
No, sorry, been having technical issues, so I was in and out.
Angela or Jill?
I don't. It's a lot of information to take in. I will say that.
Okay.
But it's good information, definitely.
Yeah.
Erin, I really enjoyed your presentation. Lots of notes were taken. Wonderful job.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I love this topic.
Okay. Well, I definitely appreciate your time this evening, and we got the meeting recorded, so the volunteers that missed it can always watch it later and all that. So Georgia, Ken, Angela, and Jill, you'll get credited for the hour. You don't have to worry about entering that into Optima. And I will bid everybody a great evening.
Okay, thank you so much. Bye, guys.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.